You're listening to Let's Get Iconic, the podcast for visionaries, leaders, creatives, and lovers done playing small. This is where identity expands, vision embodies, and radical self-love becomes inevitable. Because your life is as rich as the questions as you dare to ask and the truth you dare to embody. I'm Vanessa, founder of Inner Icon and the Neurotrance Method, and this is your invitation to draw a line in the sand, stop shrinking, and become the icon the world is waiting for. Let's get iconic. Episode 5, Drawing a Line in the Sand, the iconic leadership we need. We're living in a time of deep uncertainty, and it's moments like this that leadership gets revealed. It's the kind that shows up when the old structures start to crumble and someone has to decide what's next, because what's true is the old model simply isn't serving us and creating true abundance. What if we designed systems that actually supported generations to come? What if that was the wealth that we haven't been tapping into? It's not a crisis, but an opening. It's an invitation to create something better. But here's the thing. We don't get to stay neutral in this moment, because if we don't heal it, we deal it. The extraction model is harming. And it's time that we build something new. Again, if we don't heal it, we deal it. Whatever we're doing, we're passing it on. So the real question isn't whether we're comfortable or whether the timing is right. The real question is, are you going to be part of the solution or part of the problem? That's why it's important that you draw that line in the sand. Drawing a line in the sand requires that you know where you stand. Not where you think you're supposed to stand, not where it's safe to stand, but where you actually stand in the core of your values, in the core of your being, leading from that space, owning that space, taking up space to be the leader, ready to draw a line in the sand so that you're coming from a place of true leadership, coming from your values. If you are born into the world of the leadership that you are currently creating, without your education, your resources, your connections, just as a human being, and you were born in just whatever random gender or color of skin, just as a human being at the bottom of the structure you are currently building, would you have a way forward? Would humanity have made space for you? We have to ask ourselves honestly, is gold more important than a child protected and fed? Because we're living in a moment where that question is no longer abstract. The choices are being made right now in boardrooms, in policy rooms, in leadership meetings, and landing somewhere. On someone, on families, on communities, on children. But we don't get to opt out. If we don't heal it, we deal it. The broken system doesn't disappear because you're looking the other way. It gets passed on. The real choice is this. Are you going to be part of the solution? Are you going to pioneer what comes next? Or are you going to perpetuate what's already broken? And are you ready to face the actual cost of what that actually means in real time for real people? I'd like to start talking about incredible leaders, starting with Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln understood something that our current leadership really needs to take to heart. You can't build a nation on a foundation that leaves people behind. He said it plainly in the Gettysburg Address. The government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Not government for some people, government for the people, all of them. And when he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, he said, I never in my life felt more certain that I was doing right than I do in signing this paper, because he had seen the truth. You can't have a future if the smallest among us don't have one. The foundation holds or it doesn't. And the foundation is the people. Moving on to Florence Nightingale. 1856, the Crimean War. Florence Nightingale had just returned from the most horrifying thing she had ever witnessed. Not the wounds, not the dying, the system. The system that had decided quietly, bureaucratically, that the most vulnerable soldiers were acceptable losses. That the men dying of preventable infections in filthy hospitals were simply the cost of war. She documented 60% mortality rate, not from battle wounds, from neglect, from a system that had stopped seeing the smallest among them as worth saving. And here's what made Florence Nightingale so exceptional. She didn't just nurse, she didn't just care, she counted. She built what we now recognize as the first infographics ever used to change public policy. Her rose diagram, a data visualization so clear, so undeniable, that Parliament could not look away. She used data to prove that the most vulnerable were falling through the cracks. And she rebuilt the system from the ground up, starting with the most preventable deaths. The data will always tell you who you're actually serving and who you are leaving behind. Harriet Tubman escaped slavery. She was free. She could stay that way. She said, I'd seen their tears and sighs, and I had heard their groans, and I would give every drop of blood in my veins to free them. So she did. She went back. Not once. Approximately 13 missions over 11 years. Around 70 people led to freedom personally. And then during the Civil War, she leads a military operation she planned herself that frees over 700 people in a single night. She said, I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger. Freedom that only belongs to you is not actually freedom. The foundation of her leadership was this: the smallest among us determines whether the whole structure holds. And history didn't stop there, because throughout the last century, certain business leaders asked different questions. Not, how much can I take? But what happens when I actually serve the people who make this possible? Henry Ford looked at his workers and made a decision his competitors thought was pure madness. He paid them enough to buy the cars that they were building, doubled their wages when he didn't have to, gave them the weekend, not out of charity, out of a belief that when you honor the people at the foundation of what you're building, everyone rises. George Cadbury looked at the squalid conditions of industrial Birmingham and asked a question no one else was asking. Why should an industrial area be squalid and depressing? He built a factory surrounded by gardens. He created pensions, education, half days off, things that did not exist. Cadbury's dairy milk became the best-selling chocolate in Britain. The business thrived because workers were healthy, loyal, and proud of what they were building. Ben & Jerry's started with $12,000 and a belief that the business could have a social mission baked into the DNA from day one. Not profit first, then goodness, both at once from the beginning. These are great examples, and all of them aren't exactly perfect, and there's always room to grow, They were human, they were flawed, they were incomplete. But what I really want to say to you directly is that we are the generation that gets to do it better. We are the missing stories in this puzzle. We are the ones who get to build this truer, stronger, all the way through, where the mission doesn't get sold, where the foundation holds because it was building on something real. I'm not saying that we can't figure out different nuances of being, but I'm coming from a place of abundance. I believe we have more than enough, and we are been tricked out of understanding how abundant we truly are. There were civilizations that figured out how to create true abundance with far less. In the desert of Persia, North Africa, and the American Southwest, places where survival should have been impossible, communities designed systems where water was collected, shared, and managed so well that everyone drank, farmed, and thrived. They didn't extract from each other. They designed for each other. Big difference, right? These weren't perfect societies, but they solved the fundamental problem differently, not through accumulation and extraction, through design. Here's what this proves. Abundance isn't about having more stuff. It's about designing systems where everyone has what they need. So the clear question is this: if they could design for abundance with less technology, less resources, less of everything, why can't we? What are we choosing that they didn't? What fear are we operating from that they managed to move past? When leaders stop operating from scarcity and start designing from abundance, something extraordinary happens. You stop defending what you have and you start imagining what's possible. Your creativity opens up, your imagination expands, and true innovation becomes possible. We're no longer isolated in protection, but connected in purpose. And suddenly we realize the most exciting leadership challenge isn't about accumulating more. It's how to design systems that bring out the best in humanity. How to create the conditions where everyone's gifts have a space to shine, where unified connection becomes possible. That's not sacrifice, that's evolution. Example, 1948, Western Europe is devastated after World War II. Cities demolished, economies collapsed, populations starving. The United States had a choice: extract from weakness or rebuild from the ground up. They chose to rebuild. The Marshall Plan, approximately $13.3 billion invested into rebuilding the most devastated economies in Western Europe. And was this purely altruistic? No. Let's be honest. It was partly strategic. Cold War containment, keeping Soviet influence out of Western Europe. And here is why this matters in this conversation. Even when the motivation was partly strategic and self-interested, choosing to rebuild rather than extract created extraordinary outcomes for everyone. Western Europe economies grew by approximately 35% between 1948 and 1952. New trading partners emerged that benefited the U.S. economy for decades. The investment returned multiplied. The proof is in the pudding. You don't have to be purely generous to choose the right model. You just have to be smart enough to understand that you cannot extract from a broken foundation and expect it to hold. Abundance comes from our values. This is the path of the icon, and this is why we need iconic leadership right now. There's a question underneath the economics that I think is the most important question a leader can ask right now. If money only has value because humanity agrees it does, and humanity is only sustained when the smallest among us have a way forward, then what is money actually worth in a world that abandons its most vulnerable? Think about it. The richest in the world are running on a currency that requires a functioning humanity to have any value at all. And if that foundation of humanity, the safeguarding of the smallest, the ensuring that every child born into the world has a way forward, if that foundation crumbles, the gold coin is just metal. The mountain is just rubble. We have enough. We have always had enough. What changes is not resources. What changes is the value system we're operating from. The scarcity we're experiencing right now is not a resource problem. It is a design problem. It is a value problem. We are choosing collectively, systematically to leave people behind. Not because we have to, because we have built systems that prioritize the gold over a child's future. And those systems are not sustainable, not morally, not economically, and not humanely. This is a time to show what leadership is really about. And leadership is about caring for people, isn't it? If it's not that, then what is it? Because you can build all the systems you want, and you can hit your numbers. You can satisfy your shareholders. But if you're not asking the one question, am I actually caring for the people this affects? Then what are you really building? So this is the question we need to chew on right now. What if we could create generational wealth for ourselves and generational wealth for humanity at the same time? That's the question. What if those two things aren't in conflict? What if the most profitable, most sustainable, and most intelligent moves we can make is to build systems where everyone rises? Again, this is a design issue and a value issue, and the abundance available is off the charts. This is not sacrifice. This is true alignment. And this is the leadership and the evolution that we need. Before we go into our empowering questions of the week, I want to say something, because I know some of you are in positions where the decisions you're making right now are significant ones, not someday, now. And I want to ask, in the power that you hold right now, and in the choices you're making, would you want to be on the receiving end of them? Let that sink in. Don't look away. You need to experience this. Because if we don't heal it, we deal it. Are you ready to receive what you are dealing to your humanity right now? If you were the one affected by the policies you're implementing, if it was your family, your community, your child, would you feel safe? Would you feel like there was a way forward for you? Because here's the truth. Someone is going to be on the receiving end to the choices you're making right now. Lincoln wasn't asking people to carry a moral weight he wasn't willing to carry himself. Florence didn't look away from the data about who was being failed. Harriet didn't ask anyone to walk a road she hadn't walked first. They were consistent. And that consistency, that willingness to be accountable to the people most affected by their choices, that's what made them legendary. And now to move on to our empowering questions. I want to do one from each of our leaders represented today. Don't rush these. Let them find you. From Lincoln, what imperfect line in the sand are you waiting to draw? And what decision have you been circling, telling yourself that the timing isn't right, the cost is too high, when the truth is that the moment is already here? From Florence Nightingale, what does your data actually tell you about who your system is serving? If you looked honestly at the numbers, at who has a way forward and who doesn't in the world you're creating, what would you have to face? And for Harriet Tubman, who have you left on the other side? Who is still waiting for you to come back? Here's what I really want you to know. If you feel like you're an incredible leader right now, you've really only touched a fraction of what's possible. Because if you haven't resolved the inner tension, the protective patterns, the fear, the old programming, which this is human, we all have these to work on, then your leadership is honestly operating at a fraction of its capacity. Imagine what becomes available when you get dialed in from the inside, not just thinking differently, operating from a place of actual wholeness instead of protection. And that's when your leadership creates the impact that makes all of the difference. That's when you stop managing systems and start transforming them. That's when the world actually changes. So the question isn't, am I a good leader? The question is, am I willing to go deeper into my leadership? Am I willing to do the inner work so my outer impact matches what I'm actually capable of? Because that's where the real evolution happens. When we become the leader this moment needs. Iconic leadership is needed now more than ever. It's time to rise. Until next time, let's get iconic. Icons, thanks for being here. If anything in today's episode landed for you, please share it or do a review. It helps get the work out there. And if you're ready to go deeper, the Salon of Possibilities is your next step. A private transformational session with me you can book right now at inner-icon.com. This podcast is brought to you by Inner Icon, where leaders lead fully and lovers love boldly. Until next time, let's get iconic.